today. We will give people a few minutes to log in before we kick off our new community conversation live office hours. We're going to be talking about how to make our Revit lives easier today. While we're waiting, if you could put in the chat where you're dialing in from, that would be great. I'm coming to you from southern Pennsylvania. It is a beautiful spring day today. The sky is blue and the sun is shining, and I can't wait to get outside. So, all right,
Likewise,
we've got
here in Chicago.
Yeah, there you go. Wow, we've got David from Upper Darby, PA. That's not far from me at all. Kate, of course, from Chile, San Francisco. Tim from Mountain Joy, PA, just across the river from me. Mike from Boise, Idaho. Hi, Mike. Brian from Duluth, Minnesota. Rachel saying, "Go Reds, Chris." I missed who that was. Danya from Knoxville. Can't wait to visit you soon. Ignacio from Santiago. Wow, all over. Oh, that must have been Christopher from Cincinnati. Welcome, everybody. We'll give another minute or so. I see people are still logging in, and so we'll just give them a minute to log in. So we've got people from all over. That's just, to me, that's still fascinating that we have the technology to do this. Hello, William from Rockford, Ohio.
I'm just so glad that I have the technology handling the time zones for me, because that's something I always mess up.
Yes, very true. Yes, I have learned that now working with working for Autodesk, being an international company. Yeah, we deal a lot with time zones for sure. Hi, Sam from Minnesota. Okay. We're starting to slow down a bit. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Paul, I know you've got a full agenda here. So welcome to the new, a few things, not 55 slides though. Well, yeah. Welcome to the new community conversations hosted by the Autodesk community. Our community conversations are new live virtual events designed to allow you to gain expertise, connect with leaders, and grow your community network. Paul, if you go to the next slide.
Oops. There we go.
All right, well, my name is Kimberly Furman, and I will be your community host. I've been with Autodesk just since the very end of November, and I am loving these community conversations because I get to hang out with some really cool people. And today we have Mr. Paul Aubin. I don't really think he needs an introduction, but I will let him go ahead and introduce himself.
Thanks, Kimberly. Yes, I'm an author and consultant. LinkedIn Learning is where most of my video content can be found, and I've still got a few books laying around out there, and just providing services to architectural firms around the globe. And I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. We're really looking forward to the session. So you can go ahead to the next slide.
All righty.
Some ground rules and norms before we begin today's conversation. Everyone's line is muted to reduce background noise. We do invite you to keep your camera turned on if you like, so that we can get as close to a physical environment in our new virtual world. This conversation should be just exactly that, a conversation. Use the Zoom raise hand function, and our moderator will unmute you to ask a question. We'll also be taking questions in the chat, and Paul will be taking questions throughout and also at the end. The session is being recorded, and it will be emailed to all attendees and also uploaded to the community conversations site. By participating in this session, you consent to being recorded. Okay, next slide.
Oops.
Go ahead.
That's weird. Okay.
There we go. A little bit of a lag there. Just quickly, our safe harbor statement. I'm not going to read all this to you. If we make any forward-looking statements, I don't want you to make any purchase decisions based on those statements. If you are making purchasing decisions, look at the software in its state today and that alone. Additionally, Paul Aubin is joining us today as a customer expert and is independent of Autodesk. All activities, advice, and opinions shared by Paul should not be directly linked to Autodesk. Next slide. Community conversations provide opportunities for engineers, designers, artists, and makers to meet in a safe, live, virtual setting to share expertise, get to know leaders in your field, and grow your community network. The sessions are always supported by Autodesk community managers to help guide conversation, feed important insights back from the community to Autodesk, and support participants in getting connected to the expertise you need. Our moderators are going to put the link into the chat for the community conversations. And with that, I believe I'm going to hand it over to Paul. Paul.
All right. Thank you very much, Kimberly.
You're welcome.
So no pressure with that all opinions are my own thing, huh? Right? No, I'm just kidding. All right. So here we are. I'm in Revit 2022 for today. So it may look slightly different than whatever version of Revit you are using, but I think most of, whoops, I wanted to get this to go full screen and it's doing something weird at the bottom. Okay, well, anyway, I think almost everything I'm going to show you today would work in earlier versions as well. So it's not necessarily all new stuff. So the first thing is roof dormers. This comes up every so often, and I thought I would just kind of go through this because it's not exactly an obvious set of steps. It's not like you just go through a wizard or something. So I've got an example right here that is an existing one. And if I kind of select some of that stuff and just sort of hide it, the behind all of that, you've got this hole kind of cut through the roof there. So that's one of the pieces. And then of course you've got to build this like little house up on top, you know. So I did the 3 walls already for this group over here, but you'll see that these walls are cut really nicely into the slope of the roof, and you know, these aren't, right? So that's maybe the first thing that I'll look at. So I'm just going to use my tab key here and select these 3 walls here. And sometimes folks don't realize that even though it's, you know, it's called attached top and base, but even though it's called attached top and base, and most of the time we use it for top, it actually works for base as well. So that's the simplest thing you can do here is you can just switch this to base on the options bar and then just pick anywhere on the roof. And just like that, it cuts the bottom edges of those walls to attach to the roof there. So that's kind of handy. Now, building the little roof itself is probably a little easier in a floor plan. So I've got a roof plan for that purpose right here. And you can kind of see the way this one is. So I'll sort of emulate that. And I'm going to go to a roof by footprint. And I don't remember exactly how far that is, but it looks like about a foot or two. My apologies to those of you from around the world who are working in metric. So this would be about 300 to 600 millimeters if you want to make that translation in your mind. So I'm going to go with that 1 foot overhang, which is about 300 millimeters. And I'm going to offset these two this way. So it does look like it's, yeah, okay. So that's 1 foot all the way around then. And what I want to do is take just these 2 lines here and make those slope. So I'm going to check the little define slope. They get that little triangle there. And I really don't remember what the slope is of these. I think it's 6 and 12. And I don't have the translation off the top of my head of what 6 and 12 is. That's about, about 30, 35 degrees, maybe, something in that range. And then for the back line, you just want to kind of draw it. And a little tip when doing a dormer is it's a good idea to actually pull this back, you know, more exaggerated. And I'm going to finish this, and it's going to ask me about those same 3 walls that that I attached to the roof below. Now it's talking about the roof I just drew. So it's offering to attach them to the roof above. So I'm going to go ahead and let it do that. And let's switch back to this 3D view. The reason I did it short is you can kind of see here that if you don't do that, this back edge might get buried in the big roof and it's just tougher to pick it. So I always make it a little short. The other thing I forgot to do was set the height. Well, I guess I can come over here and see what this one is set to. So there was a base offset from level of 3'6". So what is that? That's about 1,000 millimeters maybe in that range. So interestingly, this says base offset from level is 5. Why? Well, because it associated with the lower roof level instead of the upper roof level. Not sure why, but I guess maybe that was just the last roof I built in this one. But there we go. We'll kind of adjust it so it now matches this one. Now you see this little cut here. This is optional. This has nothing to do with the dormer, but I'm just going to make it match there. So these eaves are going straight down. So that's because they're using a plumb cut. So I'll do a 2-cut plumb, and initially it's going to look really wonky. But that's because you have to give it a fascia depth, and that's going to be 6 inches or about 150 millimeters. And now what we're ready to do is attach this roof to this one, and that's going to solve this weird problem here, right? So you kind of have to take a little leap of faith when you're building this and know what the end result is going to look like, because otherwise it looks really strange and you're like, what's going on? And if you get distracted and try and fix things like that, you're kind of wasting effort because eventually it will sort itself out. Now I have a little problem right now because the zoom toolbar is covering up my Revit tabs and I don't know how to get it out of the way. Let me
You should be
see.
able to click and drag it.
Oh, there we go. Yes, I can. Okay. I was going to say, otherwise that's a little bit of a problem. Okay, here we go. So I'm on the modify tab now, and there's this button here. I know it's really a tiny icon, but it's called join unjoin roof. And if you watch the little animated tooltip, you can see this is exactly what we need, right? So I'm going to click that, pick the back edge of this little small roof, and then this surface right here of the main roof, and whammo bammo, there we have it, right? So that's the dormer geometry, but of course there's still one piece that we need, right? Because if we select all of this and hide, there's no hole in the roof, right? So I'm going to undo that, and let's add the hole. So the hole is on architecture, and it is an opening cut that is specifically designed for this purpose. And if you look really carefully at the preview there, you can see that it's doing this kind of L-shaped thing where the vertical edge is going to cut vertically and the horizontal horizontally. So that's what's special about a dormer cut. And the prompt down at the very bottom of the screen, bottom left-hand corner, says, select the roof to be cut by the dormer. So that's going to be this big roof. And then this button is lit up automatically, right? And you can start to pick the walls. And this one I got to spin around. And you can pick this roof too. Now, before I finish here, the one thing I want to point out is it grabbed the outside edges of those walls, which means that if I finish, I'm going to get an error message because I previously attached the bottom edges of the walls to the roof. So if I want to prevent that, I'm going to use this little flip grip here to flip to the inside face. So let me click the modify tool to turn off pick edges so that I can flip this existing edge. And I'll do that again with this one. And then of course it would fail because I haven't cleaned it up. So trim and extend to corner. And again, and again, oops, and one more time. Okay, so now if we click the big green finish, that should take care of it. And this guy here, if we hide again, right, we now have, well, missed the roof, but you get the idea, right? We got a nice little hole there in the middle of the roof. Now I want to show you one other thing. I'm going to delete that roof. I'm going to go to a south elevation here. I always like to show this because it's just fun. Suppose I went to an extruded roof instead, roof by extrusion. I'm going to pick a plane and I'll just do this wall right here as the plane. We're going to do it at the upper roof. That's fine. And I'm just going to build a little like eyebrow shape here. Just totally eyeballing this for now. And let's finish that. And of course, it always does something weird when you look at it in 3D, right? Like it went way through the building. So let's just pull that back. But this is what I wanted you to see. You can clean up the eaves too, but I'm going to skip that. Back edge, this edge, right? Isn't that cool? Okay, so, I don't know how many eyebrow little roofs you're doing, but that join unjoined roof is not limited to just sloped roofs. So I always like to kind of show that as a, and of course I could clean all this up, the same way with the, attached top and base to kind of finish that up and make that look like a proper eyebrow dormer there. So that is building a roof dormer. So it is a series of steps, and that's why I like to show that exercise because, if you just look at the architecture tab and you see this, this opening here, you kind of assume that that's all you need to do, but there's quite a bit more that has to happen. So anyway, Kimberly, did we have any questions on roof dormers before I move to the next one?
We have no questions in the chat yet.
All right, so I'm gonna close that one without saving it. And whoops, I did not want new. I've got another file here, and to keep myself on track, I numbered these. So basic maintenance. Let's start with right here. Okay. So let's say I wanted to open this file and I want to do a little bit of maintenance on it, right? It warns you this could take a while. Well, okay, fine, but I still need to do it. So just be aware that it could take a while. It's not going to take a while on this file. This file's tiny, so it's going to go really quick. But on a big file, yeah, go get a cup of coffee while this thing is running. But you can run this little audit, and that will attempt to clean up any, issues that might be in the file, maybe stuff that's pre-corruption, if you will. It might even weed out some actual corruption, right? But I don't notice any difference in how long that took to open versus without the audit. I'm not saying that to suggest that you should audit every time, certainly. And it's probably more of a project coordinator task than an average user task. But if you're starting to notice sluggish behavior or problems with the file, that can be one of the first steps, okay? Now, there's a similar step that you can do when closing the file. So if we go to File and Save As, and come over here. All right, there's an Options button here, and there's a couple things you can do in here. You can set how many backups you want, but there's this compact file here, which is, it's not exactly the same thing as Audit, but both of them are kind of behind the scenes, kind of cleaning up the database, right? So compact is really about removing invalid entries or, pointers that no longer point to anything, just basic cleanup and maintenance. So it's similar to some of the things that I suspect that Audit is doing, but honestly, I don't have a fixed list of exactly what each of these is doing. But this can start to help to, again, clean things up, make it run maybe a little bit more stable and so forth. So those two little simple checkboxes, one at open time, one at save time, can help you to, just kind of keep things humming along. Right. So those are a couple maintenance steps you can do. Now, another one that you're probably all familiar with is, of course, purging stuff, right? Because, I get really reluctant, that's not the right word. It stresses me when people only equate file size with performance, like it's the only metric that matters, right? File size is an important metric, but it's not the only metric that matters for performance. There's really so many other things that influence performance. So purge is definitely about file size, right? Because you're going to get rid of items that aren't being used in the project. Now, I don't recommend ever just going to purge and clicking OK here, because that's overkill. What I usually do is check none, and I systematically go through the list and choose the things that I want to purge. It takes longer, but it doesn't make any sense to purge everything, and then you've got to go finding all the stuff you purged to bring it back in next week when you realize you purged too much, right? So I think you want to be a little bit more careful about your purging here. And this is purge unused, which means that exactly that. If something is in use, you can't purge it using this command. Now, another thing to be on the lookout for in this dialog is, I wish I had a pointer here or something, but down at the bottom it says number of items checked. It's currently 0, but it will say below that, in a case where you have like CAD files that have been brought in, it'll say number of additional items checked or imported items checked. I forget the exact wording, but even when you check none, sometimes it's still going to say 1 or 2 or 3 here, because those are those kind of orphaned CAD files. And that's a good idea to get rid of those. So even if you come into this dialog, check none, you might still have a number there. Click OK, and it will purge those out, right? That's sort of like orphan CAD stuff. The thing that I think is more important than file size and purging in many cases, not all, but in many cases, is checking your warnings, okay? So I'm actually going to show you that in a different file, because I've queued up some warnings in that file. So,
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
While you're bringing that up, we do have a couple questions.
Sure.
For BIM 360 cloud models, what is the best practice for auditing? Should each user audit when accessing the file?
Yeah, I don't think each user should audit. I think that should probably be the purview of somebody who's been designated as the person in charge of file maintenance, and as a general rule, whether it's BIM 360 or not, I think. It's not so, but it's not so much that it's bad to audit, but definitely when you're working in a workshare project or a BIM 360 project, if somebody's auditing while somebody else is working in it, that feels like something you wouldn't want to be happening simultaneously. So I would rather have the auditing done, maybe in an off time after hours, or, a scheduled maintenance kind of period, like you always get those emails, we're going to be offline for, this period of time while we do scheduled maintenance. That's kind of how I would treat the audits and and even the compacting in some cases, right? So be a little bit more strategic about how you plan that. So if it's multiple users doing it, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but as long as they're doing it carefully and not at the same time as somebody else is syncing with central, like
Right.
that seems like that would be a bad idea. What was the other one? Was there
And
another
then
one?
the other one is there any way to get the purge to default to none?
No.
No, that might
Maybe.
be a great Revit idea, though, if it's not already there. So you
Exactly.
can add it
Yeah.
there.
I'll tell you the other thing I would
Thank you,
love to
Christopher.
add. Yeah, the other thing I would love to add for that is, expand and contract all. Like, I think it's ridiculous that I have to, you know, do these one at a time. Like, there's no, right? Like, I'd love to just expand the whole list. But hey, new in 2022, right? So, we'll take the little things. We're getting some improvements here, right? So we can now make this thing. So if you've got really long names in here, they're no longer going to be with a scroll bar. You can just widen this as much as you want. So, all right. So let me just fabricate a warning here. I'm just going to add a double room, and I'm sure we've all seen this one before, right? You've got multiple rooms in the same closed region. I wanted to show you that. Well, actually, I should have started with this. Let me start with this. I'm going to draw a wall on top of another wall. This is what I like to call the whisper warning. Now, it does ding at you. I don't know if you heard my ding there. But it can be really easy to miss this if you click somewhere else, because the warning just disappears, right? So let me kind of make another one, right? And it's telling me what should hopefully be obvious, because I just did it, that the highlighted walls overlap. And then it says, hey, you can use cut geometry if you want to embed one wall in the other. So sometimes the warning will actually suggest a remedy, but it doesn't suggest an exhaustive list of every possible remedy, right?
Hey,
Like,
Paul.
I mean, obvious, yeah.
Your microphone is really staticky. Is there a way you can adjust?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. See, nobody ever usually complains about my microphone because I have like high end. Is it still doing it?
It is.
It is. Okay. I have no idea how to fix that.
Maybe the connection?
Maybe. Has it been that way all along?
It's gotten worse as we've gone along.
Oh well, live TV.
Of course.
I'm gonna unplug and replug, so I'm gonna disappear for a minute. Let's see. Now I gotta tell it to.
I have a cheap $20 Logitech headset, if it makes any difference.
Yeah, that's why usually. Can you hear me now?
That's better.
No, I get it. Is that better?
It is better.
I don't know if it's using. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, we won't complain about it then. Yeah, usually I don't have that problem because I'm using the same headset that I record LinkedIn Learning with. So they sent me a pretty nice headset. So I was a little surprised to hear that. Okay, well, anyway, we'll continue. Let me know if it gets worse. So I like to think of those as like the whisper warnings, the little ones in the corner that kind of go away if you don't catch them real quick, right? But then these other warnings, there's two styles. This one, which pops up right in your face. Well, it starts off down here. I moved it over here, but it does require action on your part. But this one can be ignored, and I know that because of the presence of an OK button. So if I wanted to say, don't worry, Revit, I got this, I'm a professional, right? Then I can click OK here and ignore the warning, right? So that's an example of a warning that I could ignore, but here's an example of one that I couldn't ignore. I've got some nested constraints going on over here, right? I've got this locked 20-foot dimension. I've got this equality dimension, right? And then if I come over here and I take this other dimension here and I try and make that equal as well, well, now it's the hip bone connected to the knee bone, connected to the thigh bone, or, you know, and you're trying to pull them in different directions and something's got to give, right? So here it says cannot be ignored, right? Because what I'm trying to do is make these two dimensions equal while simultaneously keeping everything else constrained the way it was. The trouble with these cannot be ignored warnings is if you don't like the remedy they offer you, there's nothing else you can do, right? Like it's not like you can cycle through a bunch of different remedies in this dialogue. So what constraint is it going to remove exactly? Is it going to remove the 20-foot? Is it going to remove the equality? Well, it looks like it's going to remove the 20-foot, but what if I wanted the opposite? Well, you're going to have to cancel. You know, you always have that escape hatch. So I'll click cancel, and then I could deliberately turn off the equality here and then turn it back on here. And then it's still going to break because, you know, this isn't going to let me move the whole wall over, right? So, you know, sometimes you might not have a choice. You might have to, you know, just remove this, right? Turn this on. And then I'd have to select all of this and, you know, move it in such a way, or let me do it with temporary dimensions, right? Move it in such a way that this goes back to where I wanted it to be. And oh, that's interesting. Can't change the segment to that value. So, you know, and then you're stuck in warning hell, right? Like it just keeps, I think it's because I have to move the wall. So let me move the wall, you know, over to, I want to really activate that dimension, but okay, I'll just, you know, get close, right? And then relock it, but that would stay equal. But you see, like if you create this situation where you have a lot of conflicting geometry, that's going to be a warning that can't be ignored. But I think the most important part of this, now that I've piled up a bunch of warnings, is realizing that they're still there. And so when we get back to this concept of performance, you know, file size, sometimes it's that you've got 3,000 unresolved warnings. Okay. Now, this doesn't look so bad. You only see 2 entries, but actually, if you start to expand these, what you find is, oh, wait a minute. And I did this on purpose off camera, right? Look at this. Ooh, I have 4,953 unresolved warnings in this file, right? So this is a dinky little file with, you know, half a dozen walls in it, and somehow it's got 5,000 warnings. That's what you want to look at first, I think, in terms of performance before you start getting obsessed with purging every last little thing out of the project. Because if somebody's just going to add it back again tomorrow, then what good did the purge do? But if you can resolve these unresolved warnings, that's going to have a much bigger impact on the overall performance. Now, in this case, I just copied like 100 walls on top of each other. So these would be super easy to resolve. I just have to delete those redundant walls. But it's going to take a little more time in a real project to kind of sift through them and figure out which warnings you can resolve. So, you know, don't expect it to be an instant solution, but it's definitely one of the first places you want to look if you've got a file that's performing badly. So any other questions there, Kimberly? All right, I'm going to close this
no
one.
additional questions.
All right, I'm not going to resolve any of those warnings. I'm just going to, you know, let them go. All right. This one is a fun one that I'm going to give my good friend Stephen Shell credit for this, even though I didn't give him credit in my tips series. By the way, these are all selected from my weekly series on LinkedIn Learning. But Stephen Shell is a good friend of mine. We do the conference circuit together back in the days when we used to do conferences. And he's done this trick before where you kind of, it's almost like poor man's Photoshop, right? You are layering different viewports on top of one another to create a presentation. And so that's really the crux of this technique that I'm about to show you here. And I'm going to show you the final version of it, and then I'll just kind of quickly put one together here. So I think this is it. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So it's kind of this dynamic presentation here, right? So I've got to slice through one of the floor plans shown in 3D, but then do you see how I've got these columns kind of popping up past that, and the stairwell here is also popping up past that. So this is actually 3 separate viewports just sitting on top of each other. So this one is just showing the stair and elevator, right? This is the the 3rd floor plan, and then these are the columns. And you can see why I did that, because it's not like you can have different cut planes for different parts of the presentation, right? So to achieve that, you need each viewport to have their own cut, and then you just use visibility graphics to to hide the other stuff. So let me just quickly recreate this for you. So I'm just going to close this guy, and let's just grab a 3D view. I'll just do a default 3D view here. And what I'm going to do is find my view cube, which is now under another part of the Zoom interface. There we go. And I'm going to set the orientation of this view to one of my floor plans, and I'll do the level 3 floor plan. And it will kind of, there we go, crop that. And it looks sort of like that, right? Now you've got this box out here, and of course it might be easier if I bring it in a little closer. And then I was doing something that was focused on just the tenant suite there. So I'm going to crop out most of the right-hand side there. And you can do the same thing with the heights here, right? But I like it to go just a little below the ceiling. So you could start with an existing view, 3rd floor plan in this case, and then just use this section box to kind of fiddle around with it. Now I'm going to go back to top down, and I'm just using the view cube for that. And what you can next do is right click again on the view cube, and you can say, let's change this to a perspective, because that's going to make this a little bit more interesting, right? So instead of an orthographic view, now we kind of have this plan perspective there. And then of course you can start to, zoom, orbit this rather. I was starting to say zoom. You could zoom it too, but you can orbit this to kind of make it a little bit more dynamic, right? So I'm just going to kind of pick an angle that I like here, and kind of start with that. You do want to be a little careful about the distortion at the edges. So sometimes it takes a little while to fuss around with it and get it just the way you want, right? So now the trick is set up as much of this one as you can, right? So I'm just going to go to graphic display options, and I'll turn on the anti-aliasing, and maybe show the ambient shadows. So I'm going to do this one kind of like a black and white, maybe, right? So I like that. Let's say I'm satisfied with that. So now that I've got that, I'm going to rename this view, and I'll just call this 3rd pres, okay? And that'll go up to the top of the list here now. And I'm going to need to make a couple duplicates of this. And I'll rename this first copy to columns, and I'll rename this other copy to stairs. So you just want to name them descriptively so that you can know which one is which. And then for the columns one, all I need to do in here is go to visibility graphics, and I'm going to select everything except for the structural framing. Let me make this a little wider so I can actually read this. I think I only have structural columns in here. So I'm going to deselect structural columns, and then I'm going to uncheck everything. So when I click OK in this view, I'm left with only columns. And then the key is you don't want to mess with the 3D view at all, because if you do, you'll mess up the illusion, right? So if you're worried about it, you can actually use this little lock icon down here to lock the orientation of the 3D view, and that would prevent it from changing. You wouldn't be able to zoom or pan or orbit. I'm just going to be careful. And I'm just going to take this little control here now and stretch this up to show more of the columns, right? So that's all that I did with that one. And it's the same thing with the stairs. So the stairs, you're just going to repeat the process. So again, it's visibility graphics, and I'll do select all, but this time I will use a few categories. So I want railings and stairs. And in the other example, I had the elevators, but I think I did that manually. But here I'll just do stairs and railings to speed it up a little bit. And I will click OK. And so now we're just seeing the stair. And then again, stretch that up so that we can see more of the stair. So now that we've done that, we come down here and you know what, just for fun, let me just show you, you can even mix and match. Let me, that didn't really change it very much. You get a little peak of red there. Let's see if we can do that with the columns.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
Can you still use, Laura asked, can you still use the control from the section box even if the view is locked?
You know,
Can you
I was wondering
still
that
adjust it?
myself. So let's find out together. Because right as I was saying that, I was like, can I still do the section box? Yes, you can. Okay. And actually, here's another cool thing you can do. If you want to adjust the section box, but you can't really clearly decide where to snap it to in 3D in this perspective view, just select it in the perspective view and then go open some other more convenient view like a section or an elevation, and it'll still be selected. So, you know, here's a transverse building section, and you see how it's still selected? And now I can much more precisely, let's say I wanted to go up to just underneath those beams there, right? And it's going to be still stretching this section box because it was still selected. So, so yes, the answer to, was it Laura you said? Yeah, to Laura's question is it works if this is locked, and you can actually even manipulate it in other views as long as you've already selected it. So now I'm going to jump down here to sheets. I'm going to create a new sheet. And honestly, it doesn't matter what title block. I'm going to actually say none for this. And then you just start dragging these bad boys in. So you want to layer them in. Oh, sorry. Right now, my perspective is set to uncropped. So it's saying, do you want to enable the crop region? And I'll say yes, because otherwise you can't place it on a sheet. But it did a really weird crop region. You know, whatever. We're going to let that go, I guess. But if you double click in here, you could adjust this, right? Don't confuse the 2D crop with the 3D crop. You see the difference, right? So you just want the 2D crop to be on so that you can place it on a sheet, but it doesn't really matter what the size is. And in fact, we can just hide it, right? Okay, so then we just drag in the other ones, and they're probably going to prompt me the same way. So why don't I select both of these? And on the properties palette here, I will turn on crop view to avoid that error. And then I'll drag the columns in next, and watch this. It's a little tricky, but maybe I needed to have this turned on for that to work. Oh, I think I messed it up by, I should not have messed it with that crop region. So let me go back a couple steps. I think the key to lining these up is the crop region. So let me do that first. And now because I've undone, I need to redo this part. And let's drag that in. There we go. Yeah, do you see? Otherwise, you're not going to get it to snap perfectly. Okay, so it just snapped perfectly to the one underneath. And then this one snaps perfectly to the one underneath. And you can kind of see it building up there, right? So now it's just a matter of fine tuning some of the visibility, right? So I'm going to select all three of these, and I don't want to turn off the cropping, but I do want to turn off the cropping visible. So those rectangles go away. And then I think the easiest way to hide the section boxes is just going to be to go into each one, and I'm just going to hide those by element. And once I've hidden the section box, I don't usually unhide it. What I do instead is if I want to manipulate it, I just go into temporary mode and I grab it, and then, you know, you can still adjust it, and then you just turn off temporary mode and it's there. And, you know, your final presentation, I did this one quick, you know, so it needs a little bit of attention still. Like the columns are doing something weird here because I need to also crop the underside. So let me just show you that real quick, because that looks bad.
Paul?
Yes.
How exactly did you snap in the right place? That was from Radu.
So with the crop region turned on, they kind of just sense one another. So when you've got two views that are basically the same view, they just sort of sense where the other one is. It's just one of those neat little superpowers that you get from this technique that you don't really have to do anything for. You kind of get it for free. So what I'm doing right now is I'm taking that section box from the columns and I'm dragging the bottom part of it up a little too. And it's better if you kind of do this more precisely, but I'll just do it enough to give you the idea. Okay, so like when I go back out of, okay, now I'm not sure which view I'm in here. Let me go back to here. Okay, turn off temporary hide. And then, yeah, that's a little bit better. Yeah, it's too big of a gap, right? But that's what you have to fuss with a little bit, right? So I want the cropped columns to kind of stop, right at the point where they are there to kind of keep the illusion going, right? But if you spend a little bit more time on this than what I'm doing, you can kind of see the general idea. So the trick is, step one is getting the 3D view the way you like it, because that you're not going to get a chance to change later. You can change the cropping later, you can change the shading later, you can change all of those things later on each separate view. But if you want the illusion to work, you've got to get the 3D view perfect first before you duplicate the other two views, or 3 or 4, or however many of this you try and do this with, right? And that's really the trick. And then it's just the fussy work of making it pretty, So do we have other questions on this one, Kimberly?
No,
No? All right.
just the one
So,
about the snapping. And that
yeah,
had to do with the viewports being identical.
it had to do with the viewports being identical. They just sort of naturally want to snap to each other. Yeah. So it's a cool trick, and I definitely use that when I'm trying to create it's great for book covers. I use that trick a lot there. So all right, how are we doing on time here? Let's see.
We have about, I'm going to say 12 minutes, 12, 13 minutes.
All right, we're not terrible.
14,
I think I can
yeah.
do this. All right. Okay, this one was a question. It's again in the weekly series. This was a question that you can see there's no theme to all these techniques. I just kind of picked a series of my favorites, right? So somebody was trying to do these floor plans where they wanted to show not only the area but the dimensions. You see that a lot in real estate plans, right, where the dimensions of the room are listed. And we have this really expensive high-end piece of architectural software that can't do something as simple as tell me how big my bedroom is, right? So it always seems kind of funny that we have to do these workarounds for stuff like that, right? But when you select a room and you look at its properties, it's got area, it's got perimeter, it's got height, but it doesn't have length and width, right? So I had to add those. Now, I'm not going to go through that whole process. I'm just going to say that I added them as custom parameters and I added them as shared parameters. Now, they don't necessarily have to be shared parameters, but in my case, they did, because I wanted to put that information in a tag. So I'm just going to show you the dialog for project parameters, and I'll just edit one of these. So room length is what I called it. So that's a custom parameter that I created. So you can name it anything you want. If we modify it, notice that a project parameter can appear in schedules, but not tags. So if you want it only in schedules or on the properties palette, then you can just make a project parameter. It's easier. But if you want it to be in tags as well, then it's got to be a shared parameter, which means that you have to create a shared parameter file and create those parameters that way. And that maybe we'll do that in a future session or something like that. So if you're not sure how to do shared parameters, ping me later, ask me later. We'll go through that. But for now, that was the key here, is that these are shared parameters that are assigned to the rooms category. Okay. And I did one for length and width, and just for the heck of it, I threw height in there as well. There's two ways you could work with this now. I could take the bedroom here and I could just type these numbers in. I could put in 12 there and I could put in 10 here. Anybody see a problem with that? I mean, it works great in the tag, right? Because it's just reading those shared parameters, but I didn't even take a measurement of those rooms. I just made those numbers up, right? So obviously that's not what you want to do. Now you could certainly, start dimensioning these, but does anybody think this is a good idea? Hey, I guessed pretty well on that one. Not so much on that one, right? Does anybody really want to have to dimension all of these to fill in these tags? Probably not, right? So our old friend Dynamo to the rescue here, right? So Dynamo is part of Revit. It's built right in, visual programming. And it turns out that some scripts are easier than others. That's an understatement. But this one is going to be pretty easy. So let me just position it here on my screen. Now I've already got it created. I'm just going to open it up and show you what it does. So not lollipop trees. That's the wrong folder. That one's fun too, but not for today. This one is called room dimensions. I'm going to open it manually. So what that means is when you create a script in Dynamo, it'll either run instantly the minute you open it, or it will wait for you to tell it it's okay now, you can run. Okay. I want to have this, kind of available in the background here. And oh crap. I'll see live TV. I don't have Spring nodes installed. Let me install it. Shouldn't take that long, hopefully, but that's going to definitely eat into my time a little. So Dynamo has these things called packages. Packages are custom nodes created by the community that do things that the out-of-the-box nodes don't do. And this one requires the Springs package for Dynamo. So not sure which one of these it is. I think I'm going to do, I'm going to do this one. I think it's this one. Spring nodes, and we'll find out. If this little red X becomes happy in the background, then we know I got the right one. And of course it's thinking, why wouldn't it, right? Got super fast internet, but Anyway, great time for a question if anyone's got one while we're waiting for Spring nodes to install.
Yeah. No, there's no questions, but
No
we're
questions.
still discussing the aligning of the 3D views.
Oh, they like that one.
That's just fascinating. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to move this out of the way while it's thinking about installing that and at least show you what I can show you here. The first group, I apologize, I can't zoom it at the moment, but oh, there it goes. It's downloading now. Okay, and it's installed. Great. All right, and now we seem like we're happy. Okay, good. So the first group here is taking the rooms category, and it's grabbing all elements in that category. So the way I usually like to demonstrate these is I'm going to do them one group at a time. So I'm going to take the first node in the second group and freeze it. That means that it's only going to execute these 3 nodes, and I'll click run. And so what that did is it did essentially the same thing as this. If you go into Revit and you select all the stuff and you go to filter, there are 16 rooms, right? That's exactly what this collection of nodes did. So if I expand this, notice that I've got 16 items there, and these are the unique IDs of each of those rooms. So step 1, grab all the rooms from your Revit model. Okay. Step 2 is to grab the finished boundary of those rooms, turn that into something called a polycurve, which is essentially a polyline for my AutoCAD viewers there. And then, give me that list. That is a list of items. So I'm going to unfreeze this, and this one's already frozen. So let me run it. And you see here in the background that just kind of traces all of those outlines. And the reason that we're doing that is because you need geometry in Dynamo for it to do the next step, which is the spring nodes. So the spring nodes has this wonderful little node that takes geometry, in this case, these join polylines, and reads the length, width, and height from them. So if I unfreeze this and run it, then we're getting a bunch of numbers here. And I just put the outputs here just so we could see them. These are the widths, these are the lengths. And then finally, I just feed that in. Looks like I did it already. I forgot to freeze these. Okay. But I just feed that into these nodes here that are called set parameter by name. So the first one is, let me click it. You can click on a node and it shows you in blue where the wires connect. So this wire connects back to the spring nodes. This other wire connects all the way back to our list of rooms, right? So we're taking our list of rooms here, and we're saying those are the elements we want to change. What do we want to change about them? The parameter that I called room width. And what do we want to feed into those parameters? That list of values coming out of spring nodes. And then we're doing the same thing with the lengths. And if we look over here in Revit, you can see it's done already. And it filled in all of the dimensions for us on all those tags. And I think you'll all agree that that is way nicer than having to dimension every single room and type that information in manually. Not to mention the fact that if something changes, right? So let's find a room we can change here. We'll do something simple like this guy. And so now that room is a little bigger. Notice that those tags did not update. Well, let's zoom in nice and close. Watch those tags very carefully as I run it again. And, you know, that's the real power of doing this with Dynamo, is that it's going to realize that those rooms have changed, and it's going to update those tags for me. I'm not going to have to do that manually. So anyway, that is using Dynamo to help you do something that would otherwise be very tedious, mundane, boring, error prone. Take your pick of adjectives or all of the above, right?
Yeah, we
Any
do have
questions?
yeah, there are some questions on this one. Actually, two that are kind of the same, Christopher and Inaki. What happens on an L-shaped room?
I haven't investigated completely what Spring Nodes is doing here. So we are a little bit at their mercy, but I'm guessing that it takes a bounding box. So let's test that theory. Like right here, for example, you can see where the room separation lines are here. And so if I measure that, that is 13 foot 10. So that's what number we're seeing there. So it's using a bounding box. Now this one would be the interesting one to test, whether or not it's going parallel to the sides, or it kind of looks like it's doing a square. So there is a little bit of a limitation there, right? Like this one, yeah, it looks like it's just doing a square box around it. So for something like the entry, you might have to come in and override that number, the numbers that it's giving you, because that may not seem reasonable, right? Like I might want this width going this way. So, trust but verify. You definitely would want to spot check a few of the really obvious ones. But I think for most of the spaces, I think you're going to be satisfied with the results. The kitchen, do you want to include this little bump up here or not? So maybe put a room separator in there, so there might be a few little things you have to do to adjust it. But as far as whether there's something you could do on the Dynamo side, I'm positive you could. I'm not that talented a programmer. So I don't know how I could go into Dynamo and tell it, well, analyze the shape, and if it's doing this, that, or the other thing, do something else with it. But I'm positive that could be done with somebody who's more programming savvy. So.
Okay, so your statement about the override then probably answers Ben's question. He asks, can you just add the parameter to the tag?
Yeah, I mean, these are still, so here's the beauty of this, right? Like Dynamo is just a tool that works alongside of Revit, right? And I can still come in here and click right in this tag and change this. Now, at this moment, it's going to say 17. If I run it again, it's going to go back to 15 too. So the trick is run Dynamo, get it close to what you want, close Dynamo, and then edit the values, right? And then you're good to go. If you decide from now on that I don't want Dynamo to do the kitchen, then we would have to come back here, and instead of grabbing all of the rooms, we would do different collections of selection nodes. And I'm not going to go through it, but I'll just show you that there's all these different ways to select stuff, right? So you don't have to just select everything. You could say, I only want to select these things and let Dynamo manage those, but these one or two special rooms, I'm going to do those manually. And then you could still run Dynamo again in the future without having to keep chasing the changes that it made.
And we're down to our last 5 minutes.
Okay.
I know Danya was looking forward to the family cut behavior.
Yeah, what did I just do? I closed Dynamo and it looked like it closed Revit. Yeah, I think we can squeeze it in. Let's okay. Do it. So family cut behavior. So here's the thing. The key to this, I'll tell you the punchline before the joke. The key to this is nested families. So I've got this really simple example here. And this is a plumbing fixture, shower. This is a plumbing fixture, shower. But they're going to behave very differently. So if we take a look at this one, this section here, right? They look exactly the same, initially speaking, right? But if we come back and we double click this section, right? Let's put that side by side here. Come on. There we go. All right. So look where that's cutting through. And does that seem correct, right? The section is cutting through this little corner and looking, away from the shower, but yet I'm still seeing the shower head and the handle, right? So now let me click over into this view and open up section 2. Where are you? There we go. Or is that section 3? I'm going to guess it's section 3. Aha. And then look at the way this one's behaving, right? So what's the difference? What's the trick, right? Well, it's all about nested families. Okay. So this one is literally slicing through what it actually sees there. So if I were to select this, yes, it's a plumbing fixture, but if I tab in, notice that I can select the shower pan separately and it's a generic model. So the trick is finding a cuttable category and then you nest that in as a shared family. Okay. I see Donya there's nodding along. So yeah, so that I'm glad I could help you with that. So let me just show you. I have a PowerPoint slide that helps with this too, right? This is the only slide that that goes along with this as well. So here we did the agenda, and okay. So when it's non-cuttable, it doesn't matter. The cut always matters. But when it's a non-cuttable category, it's looking at the bounding box of the entire object. So that's why even though we were slicing through a little corner, we were still seeing the stuff behind us because it's looking at the whole object and showing it as if it was an elevation. But when you have a cuttable category, right? Like, so the shower pan now has its own bounding box and the fixtures have their own bounding box. So if I started moving that section, eventually you would see the fixtures, but notice that it's a much smaller tolerance because I'd have to have that section cutting really close to those fixtures before they're going to show up. Okay. So I can just jump back here to Revit and show you that, right? Like if I take this section and I start to move it, not stretch it, move it, right? It's still cutting, right? Still cutting, and then I get a little closer. Remember, the 2D geometry doesn't matter. It's the 3, there it is, right? So now I've hit the bounding box of those fixtures, and now they're starting to show, okay? So that's the trick, is you just need to make sure that your family has, so if I edit family, this is a nested generic model. This is a nested plumbing fixture. So this one is still a plumbing fixture, but now because it's so much smaller, it has a much smaller bounding box, and it's a much less influence on the overall, and it's easier for you to avoid it with your section line, right? But this, you can show the shower pan cut throughout. And then the trick with this one is, what I mean by a shared family is if I edit it, I just need to make sure I check this box over here that says shared. If you don't do that, it won't work. It'll just get embedded in its host family and it'll just cut like the host family does. But because it's shared, it uses its own cut rules. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We are down to the
and we
last
did it. Yeah,
minute.
we
You
got there.
did it. Yes.
So, and we even took questions throughout. So pretty awesome. All right.
Yeah. And Radu, your question, can the shower family be shared for a closer look? Sounds like 2 different families. I hope that Paul did just answer that question for you in the last few moments there. So Paul, if you could switch back over to the PowerPoint, that would be great. We're going to wrap up today's session with 2 final slides. If you're looking for other ways to connect and engage in the Autodesk community, we have a few resources for you. You can go to the next slide.
All right.
You can explore the various Autodesk communities, including the global network of user groups in our Autodesk group network, our industry-focused communities helping your colleagues solve business challenges together, the Autodesk forums, and of course, staying connected with us on Twitter. And our lovely Kate or Rachel have posted links to all those items in the chat window as well. So feel free to advance to the next slide, please. And thank you. And I think you may have to click through this one, but thank you for attending our revitalized community conversations. We welcome your feedback about your experience today. A post-session survey will be posted in the chat. Continue to stay connected in the Autodesk community, and we hope to see you next time. Paul, thank you so much for your time today.
It was my pleasure.
Even using Revit for as many years as I have, I definitely learned something new today. So thank you.
Good. Then I met my goal. And I just want to say, in the original post for this session, discussion. I did post links to all of these tips in my series. So if you want to watch the tips that these were drawn from and you have access to LinkedIn Learning, then you can get to them there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.